So we've been involved in a project looking at what the value of selecting animals that are more resistant to BRD, bovine respiratory disease, might be. And we basically did an economic modelling simulation with Mike McNeil from the Agricultural Research Service and myself. And we basically looked at what would be the effect if you could select animals to have less incidence of BRD in the feedlot. And we kind of looked at the value of that to the whole, if you were a cow-calf operation that retained ownership through the feedlot and you were able to reduce the incidence of BRD, and found that that particular trait has a very high relative economic value when you look at the cost of BRD, both in terms of mortality and then morbidity or sickness in the animals that get it, and the treatment costs and the decreased production that is associated with those animals as they recover. And so it's a very high value, and that opens up the possibility of, well, if you could select more disease-resistant animals, that would be a very valuable proposition to the beef industry. And as we were developing this model, we were actually part of a large team of multi-institutional researchers that were awarded a large USDA grant for bovine respiratory disease to utilise the new genomic tools, the DNA technologies that have come online since the bovine genome's been sequenced, to try to use these new technologies to help us understand what parts of the genome are associated with BRD resistance, and see if we can enable selection approaches to start selecting animals that are more disease resistant. And of course, that's a really good trait from an economic perspective, but also from an animal health and welfare perspective. If we can have less morbidity and mortality in the feedlots, it's a win-win situation for everybody, producers and consumers.
Absolutely, and I understand from your presentation that even though the heritability of this trait, at least as best as we can measure it at this stage, is relatively low, but because the BRD has such a large economic impact in the industry, that the resistance potentially has a far greater value than some of the traits that we typically measure for, like yearling weights and weaning weights and milk production and some of those the EPDs that are in use now.
That's right, yeah. The heritability of BRD resistance is relatively low. It's about 10%. But we've not really used genetic selection to select for disease-resistant animals until this time. We just haven't had any selection criteria that you could use, other than exposing animals and seeing which ones survived and which ones didn't. We didn't have the tools, but now we have the opportunity to use DNA to give us those selection tools to start selecting for more disease-resistant animals. And other industries have done this very successfully, mastitis, and the poultry industry has also been able to select against Merrick's disease. So I think the possibility is there, and the value proposition is such that if we could decrease there's over 1 million animals in the US industry per year die from bovine respiratory disease, and there's a great opportunity to not have that happen if we can select against it.